What if you could decide, not when you live, but when you die? This is not a scene from a dystopian feature, but a very real question asked by many today. In the shadows of medical ethics and legal boundaries, a question that touches on the very essence of life, suffering, and personal freedom. What if the right to die is actually a right we all have? In the debate over whether we should have the power to end our own lives, one question echoes louder than all others. Can society allow such a choice without abandoning its responsibilities to protect the vulnerable? The right to die movement is a complex matter that refers to people's rights to physician-assisted suicide due to terminal illness and unbearable suffering. Its origins go back as far as the Golden Age of Athens, when great philosophers such as Socrates and Plato discussed the consequences and results of death and suicide. The promotion of personal autonomy and individual rights by hypothesizers such as Thomas Hobbes and John Locke in the Enlightenment period set the groundwork for later discussions on the right to choose death. In the 20th century, the right to die movement began to become one of the most controversial and political movements. The movement became an active subject when more advances in modern medicine, especially life-extending technology, came forth. At the beginning of the 20th century, people were living longer lives, but their lives became painful towards the end. That is what started turning the focus from life quantity to life quality, which led to ideas surrounding dignity and death. The Euthanasia Society of America was one of the first parties to push for legal changes. Founded in 1938, it claimed that a person possesses the right to make decisions regarding their own death, at least in cases involving incurable illness. The right to die movement has continued into the 21st century, with Switzerland and several US states allowing physician-assisted suicide. Yet it remains a controversial issue, with many boons and sacrifices on both sides. Opposers of euthanasia and assisted suicide argue that vulnerable people may be pressured to take their own lives. Others believe the individual should have the right to die with dignity and the right not to suffer for longer than necessary, especially when they die from terminal illness. Despite the controversy over ethics, the right to die movement has set legal precedents in various parts of the world. This signals a move towards greater autonomy in end-of-life decisions. The right to die movement has been inspired by some key figures who have advocated the legalization of physician-assisted suicide and worked to ensure that the terminally ill have access to humane choices. One of the more well-known proponents is Derek Humphrey, founder of the Hemlock Society in 1980. After he helped his terminally ill wife end her life, the organization was established with the purpose of promoting public discussion and supporting legislation that would promote physician-assisted suicide, a legacy that had repercussions in the movement. Dr. Jack Kevorkian, better known as Dr. Death, gained notoriety in the 1990s for his highly controversial role in helping people with terminal illnesses die. He had said he helped more than 130 people through his suicide machine, and in so doing precipitated a national debate about the ethical and legal limits for assisted suicide should be. The uproar only gave more voice to the dying who were seeking some measure of control over their last days. Another important figure is Barbara Coombs Lee, the tireless campaigner for aid in dying legislation. She fought hard to get Oregon's Death with Dignity Act passed into law in 1997, making Oregon the first state to legalize physician-assisted suicide. Her work thereby set a landmark for other states and changed public perception towards a more compassionate approach in dealing with the end-of-life care. This landmark case involved a patient, Nancy Cruzan, in a persistent vegetative state and the right of a competent person to refuse life-prolonging measures. The U.S. Supreme Court thereby set a basic precedent for all subsequent cases, bringing into strong relief that need for clear evidence of a patient's wishes in end-of-life decisions. By unanimous decision, the Supreme Court held in favor of a state ban on physician-assisted suicide, pointing at Washington state's valid interest in the protection of human life and the vulnerable, and to possible abuses. The decision separated assisted suicide from other types of end-of-life care and affected national debates concerning assisted dying. This case, decided concurrently with Glucksberg, involved a New York statute outlawing doctor-assisted suicide. The Supreme Court ruled that a constitutional distinction could be maintained between allowing patients to refuse life-prolonging treatments and assisted suicide. Essentially, the states were granted the right to legalize certain medical practices regarding death and dying. The short-term effects of the right to die movements are complex and vary depending on the region. One immediate outcome is the spark of public conversation. The movement encourages people to think of difficult questions about the moral, ethical, and legal aspects of how we handle end-of-life decisions. Also, the movement raises concerns among many groups, such as the elderly, disabled, or those with illnesses. Many people worry about being pressured into choosing assisted suicide, even if they are not suffering unbearable pain. So, people have the right to die but are also responsible to consider whether it is the correct decision or not by themselves. This leads to fears about potential abuse and could shift the focus away from improving pain management and emotional support. To address these concerns, some places have expanded their care services, recognizing that many people seek assisted death because they lack end-of-life care. However, the movements often face strong resistance from religious groups who believe that assisted suicide violates sacred or natural principles about life and death. This opposition can fuel social divisions, legal challenges, and public protests. In the end, while the Right to Die movement causes significant changes in policy and healthcare, it also raises tension within society as people debate conflicting values around individual freedom. The Right to Die movement is not about forcing anyone to die, but giving them the right to decide how to face the end of their lives, especially when suffering from a terminal illness or unbearable suffering. It is a very personal issue. It forces out many questions. Who gets to decide when a life should end? How do we weigh holding on against letting go? It is about providing individuals with choice and control over one of life's most challenging moments and creating a space for open discussion around death that which many of us avoid. The movement, meanwhile, gives rise to both hope and challenges for healthcare. This could inspire greater care for the dying, such as seeking additional ways to take away pain and discomfort and provide peace. On the other hand, it is a very challenging task for doctors and nurses to help someone die. As countries or states adopt laws that allow assisted suicide, healthcare professionals quickly face new challenges. Because of this, doctors tend to have trouble balancing their opinion with the right to die, which means doctors had to consider the responsibility and the patient's right over their own opinion. Even though it is the right for someone to choose assisted suicide, it's the doctor's responsibility to carry it out. That's a big shift from the usual focus on saving lives, and it's not an easy thing for many in the field of medicine to agree with. Assisted dying could also save money for families and healthcare systems, but that's a very sensitive topic because it feels wrong to put a price on someone's life. The right to die is an issue that weighs personal autonomy against the obligations to society. Technically, it assumes every person has a right to direct their end-of-life decisions, especially in the case of terminal conditions or unbearable pain. However, with this right comes the associated obligation to protect vulnerable classes of people, including ensuring that the elderly and disabled are not coerced, intimidated, or threatened into making decisions because of their sense of feeling a burden.